The Venezuelan economy has undergone significant strain under its current president Nicolás Maduro. Since his ascendancy in 2013, Maduro, who is a successor of late President Hugo Chavez, has received challenges regarding his legitimacy, whether it be through forms of organic protest or through the organized opposition led by figures like Enrique Capriles of the Justice First Party. Maduro has also supported illiberal policies such as the attempted dissolution of the Venezuelan National Assembly in early 2016. However, he is still constrained by the increasingly weak democratic institutions that have spanned for decades, thus characterizing his regime as a hybrid regime. The situation has exacerbated rigid viewpoints on whether Maduro's hybrid regime can be seen as a force of good or one of evil. From the time Chavez became president in 1999 up until his death in 2013, he headed programs that ultimately narrowed economic inequalities and introduced subsidized healthcare via the Barrio Adentro mission. Much of his public approval rating closely followed the path of social spending in the country, and much of this spending was facilitated by an increase in oil prices, particularly between 2004 and 2008. Chavez attempted to capitalize on the situation by proposing a referendum in 2007 that would abolish presidential term limits and rename the capital city of Caracas to Bolivar's Cradle and Queen of the Guajira, Ripano. The referendum failed, but the situation gives a glimpse on how reliant the Venezuelan economy is on oil. We can see just how much oil impacts the Venezuelan economy when we analyze the 2002 oil strike of the state-run company PDVSA, which occurred following an attempted coup d'etat on Chavez that same year. However, here's the problem with using that theory. The Venezuelan economy was already on a downward trend by 2010, which was confirmed in 2013. However, oil prices during that same period actually went up from $80 a barrel to $100 a barrel. So what happened? The actual reason for Venezuela's economic woes stem from a combination of illiberal trade policies and long-term trends in national savings. These trade policies can be explained through the Mundell-Fleming trilemma, where a country can't have fixed exchange rates, free capital movement, or independent monetary policy at the same time. The country can only have two of these qualities. An example would be the Eurozone, which has a free flow of capital and fixed exchange rates between Eurozone members in the form of the euro. However, it cannot have sovereign monetary policy because that would violate the dilemma. The Bank of England attempted to use all three policies in 1992 when it pegged the pound sterling to the European exchange rate mechanism. At the same time, it also allowed for free flow of capital but also attempted to control monetary policy. The result was disaster when the pound sterling plummeted from nearly £2 per dollar to 1.5 pounds per dollar. The reason for this was that the UK was attempting to control monetary policy and fixed exchange rate of the pound, while not controlling the supplier demand for the currency in financial markets. The same situation is looming in Venezuela, which is why the government has sought to increase capital controls. Right now, the Venezuelan government has a fixed exchange rate of the Bolivar Fuerte and maintains independent monetary policy. However, capital controls are in place because the supply and demand from financial markets would undermine that fixed exchange rate. This is why Chavez created CADIVI in 2003 in order to limit capital flight, and why Maduro reorganized CADIVI into CENCOEX in 2015. However, capital controls have a much longer history in Venezuela, with agencies like RECADI, which provided a fixed exchange rate during the most of the 1980s. What followed were widespread protests known as the Caracazo. Unlike in China, where capital controls continue to be very tight, Venezuela has had a tough time in controlling the free flow of money, and it can be argued that the government has actively pursued all three policies of the impossible trinity, which is why inflation has skyrocketed. However, that's not the whole entire story. Venezuela has also violated a major rule of the solo swan model. The solo swan model was created during the Cold War in order to explain the growth rate of the Soviet Union. The model posits that growth rate pretty much has a lot to do with national savings. However, even a substantial amount of national savings will only get a country so far. Countries also need strong institutions to continue growth. This can be seen with the national savings acquired by the Soviet Union, which then reached a peak in economic growth during the 1970s. However, unlike the Soviet Union, the national savings of Venezuela had been plummeting since the OPEC embargo in 1973, and only started recovering from 1993 onward. This could explain the decent economic performance of the country during the 2000s. However, national savings started plummeting again in 2006. This confirms the downtrend in economic growth we see from 2010 onward, although it's a bit lagged. Therefore, it is true that the outrageous spending carried out during Chavez's presidency is responsible for the current economic woes. Even sufficient national savings wouldn't help Venezuela in the long run because its institutions are extremely weak. These institutional weaknesses precede the Bolivarian regime, however they were exacerbated by an even further degradation of political institutions and a shrinkage of national savings, as seen by the referendum in 2007 and by the plummet of national savings in 2006 onward. The current oil glut in the world will obviously not alleviate Venezuela's situation, but analyzing its economy through that one dimension causes people to lose focus on long-term trends that have developed during the Bolivarian regime and regimes preceding it.